Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Monday night, July the 26th. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. It's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and I'm happy to be here. My chat room is open if anybody would like to come sit in the chat room. And I just finished a show with Elizabeth Brawley on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, and it was a great show talking about latchkey kids and the situations that can arise, and you know, parents really just need to get the information. Really, the more information we can get out to people, and the more information that we have, you know, to become educated and aware of the protecting children and, you know, stopping and preventing child abuse, you know, the better. I seriously think it's all about education. And that's why I'm doing these shows. You know, I'm just one more person. I just want to be one more voice out there talking about child abuse prevention, raising awareness and regarding domestic violence and child abuse and all human rights abuses, really. But I mainly focus on child abuse because children do not have a voice. They do not have protection unless we stand up and protect them. And, you know, the parents, obviously, who are abusing these children are not protecting them, and they're not standing up for them. So we have to do that as a society, as a body, you know, as a people, a planet full of people, right? It's our responsibility to protect children and to make sure that the child rights are in place, and that there is, you know, programs out there to help parents who are having a hard time, and that there is, you know, ways to help children get help after they have been abused. I'd rather see us stop it before any more children are abused, and that's why I'm doing these shows. Primary prevention is really the way to go. Primary prevention is what Dreamcatchers for Abused Children does, and so many other groups out there as well. Because what it does is it's to promote awareness, education, awareness, and prevention of child abuse in order to stop child abuse before it happens. You know, we don't want to see any more children being abused, and that's the whole issue. It's secondary and tertiary prevention is all about helping after the abuse has already happened. And so, I mean, we need that. But the problem being is that I'd rather see us stop child abuse, and that way we don't have a need for the tertiary and the secondary and the tertiary prevention, because I'd rather see no more children being abused, right? So that's why I'm doing these shows. I'm not a professional. I don't have any counseling certificates, therapist certificates. You know, I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk shows to get this information out to people. I'm also the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, working with them, volunteer position that I love and is really my main focus, and just to be a part of change, part of the, you know, to change this world for the better for children, right? I'm also a survivor of child abuse, and, you know, I know all about domestic violence and child abuse, and I grew up in it. It's my world, and it was anyway. And so, you know, it's really, I couldn't stand sitting around any longer on the couch, not being part of the change. I didn't like what I was seeing, and I didn't like the way that I was brought up, and I didn't like what was happening in my family, and the suffering that was, you know, the relentless and endless suffering that went on in my home, in our home. You know, it really, about 3 years ago, I decided to get involved, and I thought, okay, what can I do? I have to get involved. I can no longer sit on the sidelines. And so it was really a very positive thing for me, because it helped me in my healing journey, because before that I had not really done any healing from the abuse that I suffered as a child. And so it was a catalyst for me to move me ahead, to, you know, to seek out my healing journey, and as well as just to be another voice for the world, just to say we have to stop child abuse, and we have to protect children, right? So that's why I'm doing these shows. You have to listen at your own discretion. I talk about everything related to abuse and child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, sexual abuse, you name it, I'm talking about it. And so it's very disturbing to some people if they have not experienced a lot of, you know, if they've never experienced abuse in the first place, if they haven't heard a lot about abuse, it can be very upsetting. And so you have to listen at your own discretion and be safe. You know, we want, you know, especially if you're a survivor of child abuse, and, you know, you could be triggered. So you have to know where you're at in your healing journey and whether or not the show might trigger you. And, you know, please do turn it off, because you would not be hurting my feelings at all. I grew up abused, so I'm used to dealing with abuse. It's something that I was forced to endure as a child, and then, you know, had to learn how to cope with and how to deal with as a young adult, and then had to learn how to not destroy myself from it as an older adult, and then just recently, 3 years ago, decided to fight to live instead of fight to die, right? So that's why I'm doing these shows. I'm perfectly okay talking about abuse. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. What made me uncomfortable was being abused, right? That's what made me uncomfortable. But talking about it does not make me uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, we have to talk about it or it will not change. Abuse has always been hidden under the cover, under the carpet. I mean, they always say, well, it's swept under the carpet. Well, it is. It's just tucked away nicely under the carpet. No one wants to deal with it. It's the ugliest subject on the planet. Guaranteed. No one wants to talk about it. Because why? It's going on in everyone's homes. That's why. People are always abusing everybody. But we're talking child abuse. We're talking serious child abuse. And that is not necessarily going on in everybody's homes. But people are abusive towards each other all the time. Whether it's verbal abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, But, what I'm talking about is child abuse. And I'm talking about, any type of child abuse. Physical, sexual, psychological, emotional, verbal. It all hurts, and it all has to stop, right? So that's why I'm doing these shows. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show because I fight for your life. I'm fighting to save children's lives. That's what I do. And so you'd be doing yourself a favor. You'd be doing me a favor by getting the information on how to stay safe online, realizing that at any time there are about 750,000 child sexual predators online trying to get a hold of children. And that's what they do, and they're very good at it. They pose as young people, they pose as 14-year-olds, 12-year-olds. They know all the latest music, they know all the great movies, they know all the cool stuff that young people like to do, and they manipulate young people. They get young people to tell them where they live. They turn them against their families and get them to meet them places, and then they sexually assault them. Or if they don't kill them, they will assault the child and the young person. So this is the thing. You want to keep yourself safe. And all you have to do is type into your browser online, just type in internet safety for children, online safety for children. Any of those things will bring you to a whole bunch of good websites full of good information on how to keep yourself safe online, right? So you want to do that. And you want to have permission to listen to my show, mainly because there's a lot of adult content on here. And I don't know how young the people are who are listening to the show. There could be some young children listening to the show, and I don't know because I don't know where the players are. And so there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I would appreciate it if you'd have permission from an adult or parent or caregiver, someone who would listen to the show with you. And that way they could help you make the decision whether or not you really should be listening to the show. And then they can help you if you have questions, right? So that's the big thing, right? So there's no confusion and just wondering, what is this lady talking about? I don't know anything about abuse, right? Because abuse is not talked about very often in the mainstream society. And really all we ever see, and this is why I'm doing these shows, is because all we ever see is the headlines. Children losing their lives at the hands of their parents or caregivers, because of abuse. So we see lots of children killed every day because their parents and caregivers abused them and killed them. And some fall prey and victim to child sexual predators and whatnot. And then, otherwise we see that they're in the hospital because of the abuse. So they're in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries. And that's all we ever see. We don't see any mainstream, across the country, nationwide, Canada-wide, USA-wide, information about how to prevent child abuse, how to protect your children. I mean, it should be on the front page of every newspaper going, and it should be a topic on every newscast, and it should be on the radio. They should have one radio station devoted to it, where people could tune in to get the information, right? I mean, this needs to be mainstream. It needs to be out there. It needs to be on billboards. It needs to be on bus stop rest seats, It needs to be everywhere, because 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused under the age of 18. And that's pretty much the stats all the way across the board for all the different types of abuse, whether it's physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbal, you name it. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys. Why is this not why is this not considered an epidemic? You know what I mean? It's an epidemic, and it's killing our kids. And if it doesn't kill them, it kills their spirit. So it murders them anyway. Even if it doesn't murder them physically, it will murder them spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, in every way. So this is why I'm doing these shows, and I'm so glad that you can tune in. I appreciate everybody who's listening, and I looked and I've got like over 8,000 shows listened to, so I know that people are listening, and I really appreciate it. Let me tell you, because it makes it worthwhile my time to do this. And if, I hope the information is helpful for people. I know it is for me. I study. I'm in between courses at MRU. I study child rights and human rights and international community development. I haven't been able to continue my courses because I couldn't afford to go, and until my financial situation changes, I still can't go. So I'm in between courses, and I continually study, because when I go back to take the courses, I'll just have that much more knowledge, that much more education to finish the course, right? So I'm continually studying, and so yeah, this stuff helps me as well, and it helps me as a survivor as well. And it also helps me because I feel like it's making a difference, because we all need to be responsible. Take the bull by the horn, you know what I mean? And take this thing in our own hands and really start working to stop and prevent child abuse, right? So important. It's very important to me because I'm a survivor. So we were looking at this article that I found from childwelfare.gov. It's a great article, and it's I'll get you the title here in a minute. We're on page 24, but it's www.childwelfare.gov/pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /foundation/foundation.pdf. And it's a great workbook, and it's not a workbook, but it's a PDF download. And it's I'll just get you the title. It's called A Coordinated Response to Child Abuse and Neglect, the Foundation for Practice, and it is put out by, it's a Child Abuse and Neglect User Manual series. And we started working on this on Friday night, and it's put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau, and the Office on Child Abuse and Neglect. And it's a great PDF. It's 114 pages long. We're on page 24, and it's called A Coordinated Response to Child Abuse and Neglect, the Foundation for Practice. But there's some good information on here. It's a relatively current, more like an updated PDF. It's from 2003, but let me tell you, some of the other stuff is from 1996, or 1991, or 1984. So it's kind of one of the more current documents out there regarding the whole issue of child abuse and neglect, right? And so that's why I wanted to take a look at it, because there'll be more information in these newer, more up-to-date, more modern PDFs and downloads that we can get a hold of, right? So we started this Friday night, and I want to continue talking about it. We went through and talked about, they said, what is child maltreatment? They want to talk about that, the CAPTA definition of sexual abuse, CAPTA definition of withholding of medically indicated treatment, different things like that, mandatory child maltreatment reporting statutes and stuff, juvenile court jurisdiction statutes, lots of great information on here. And then they went to talk about general definitions by type of maltreatment, and that's where we were talking about physical, sexual, neglect, and psychological. And we went through quite a bit of it, and I wanted to continue on looking at that part because we didn't get to quite finish that part. So page 24 of this download, I'm just going to get to where we left off here. Child neglect. So they're talking right here. I'm just reading from the page, and you can pull it up in www.childwelfare.gov/pubs/user manuals /foundation/foundation.pdf. And child neglect, they said, child neglect, the most common form of child maltreatment, is generally characterized by omissions in care resulting in significant harm or risk of significant harm. And neglect is frequently defined in terms of a failure to provide for the child's basic needs, deprivation of adequate food, clothing, shelter, supervision, or medical care. And neglect laws often exclude circumstances in which a child's needs are not met because of poverty or an inability to provide. In addition, many states establish religious exemptions for parents who choose not to seek medical care for their children due to religious beliefs that may prohibit medical intervention. So, there are, these areas, sort of gray areas where, they will make exceptions for certain things. But mainly it has to do with child rights, because children have the right to life, first of all. I don't know if many people know that. I mean, it should be something that everybody should know. We all have human rights, and not that they're upheld, but at least we do have them. Children have the right to life, right? They have the right to to protection, safety, shelter, food, clothing, water, medical care, supervision. They actually have it gone to include in the child rights mandates and all that a child has the right to education, government, they have the right to spirituality, they have the right to their own religion, they have the right to choose to follow their genealogy and their heritage, they have the right they have all kinds of rights. They have the right actually to grow up in a loving home. They actually added that in there. Because this is really a child's right, but people just don't realize that, and they just think children have no rights, and they treat them extremely badly. And over my lifetime, I've seen people treating their children completely horribly since I was young, since I was a baby, since I was cognitive, which is be about 4 years old, and on all the way up. You see people treating their children so horribly, and you're just like, why did you have those children? Why? You don't pop out children to mistreat them. I'm sorry. And anybody that thinks that is extremely sick and needs to go away somewhere for a very, very long time, never to be seen again. You know what I'm saying? Some island somewhere. They can just sit there and die by themselves, right? Children are precious, right? I lost mine. I lost a baby half term and never did get to have any more children. It just didn't happen. And children are precious. They're absolutely precious. They can drive you absolutely crazy. They do the stupidest things. When they get older, they get into all kinds of trouble. As teenagers, I know, I was a teenager and I was always getting into trouble. But yet, they're so precious, and they are our future. And, when a parent, has a child, a mother and a father, raising a family or same-sex partner, whatever, two people that love this baby, and they bring this baby into the world, and they just love this baby. That's what it's all about. You know what I mean? And sure, the kid's going to make mistakes and going to drive you crazy, but there's ways to cope. And all we have to do as parents is look out and get the information on how to cope, right? Instead of lashing out at our children and making them feel bad about being on the planet and causing them a lot of grief and a lot of physical harm and sexual damage. And I mean, it's really unfortunate what people do to their children, and it just makes me extremely mad because 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be abused. And let me tell you, I know when I was growing up, I knew a lot of children who were abused. And I mean horribly abused. Some of them were raped by their fathers. Actually I knew two different girls from 2 different families that were raped by their fathers. I knew girls that were beaten up by their stepfathers, and I knew a friend of mine who was beaten so badly by his own father that his sister and his sister too, they took him to court and won, and they got lots of money, and they got to not have to be raised by their biological father. I'm not sure who they went to go live with, but anyway, they actually won. Right on. I was happy about that. And but they're scarred for life, and my friend couldn't even wear shorts because his legs were so badly scarred. You know what I mean? It's so bad. It's so bad what people do to their children. I knew so many. Actually, I only knew a couple of people in my whole youth that were not abused. So this just tells you, you know what I mean? If you have never talked to anybody about child abuse, and you run into somebody who has been abused, they will know all kinds of people who have been abused because they will have either grown up in a neighborhood that was extremely violent and bad and just kind of, poverty level and a lot of problems, or they just abused kids seek out other abused kids quite often. They know, we all knew what each other was going through. We talked to each other. And so, we knew when we were having a bad day, we'd see the bruises. We'd be crying on the street. And of course, your friends are going to know what's going on. It's something at your house. So this is the thing, child abuse is horribly, horribly wrong, and sadly enough, there's a lot of people that think it's okay. It's unfortunate that we can't do this eye-to-eye thing, and whatever a parent does to a child, whether it's beat them or starve them or strangle them or abuse them sexually, that couldn't be done back to the parent. I mean, I would really, sadly enough, like to see that happen. Because I think it would stop a lot of parents from doing what they do. If parents thought that they were going to have to suffer the same punishment that they've done to their child, which is beat the crap out of them, call them names, abuse them sexually, lock them in a room, just all these ridiculously abusive behaviors towards their children, if they thought that they were going to have that done to them, they might think a little bit differently. Because sometimes kids need help, but they don't need abuse. And sometimes they need direction, but they don't need abuse. And sometimes kids go off the deep end, and they need a counselor or a therapist, but they don't need abuse. That's the whole issue, right? You have to be responsible for that child, and so you're responsible for their well-being. So beating on them and calling them names and making them feel really low is not being responsible. It's hurting the child, and really you're just an abuser if you're doing that. You have to get help for your children. So, because not every child is some sort of precious little child. They're all precious to me, but they're not always going to behave. And so that's why parents would feel justified. Well, my kid wouldn't behave, so I had to do this, because I had to teach him, And it's like, well, I had to do this because I had to show him who was boss, right? And that doesn't do any good at all. It doesn't teach children respect, and what it does is teach them to be abusers, because that's all it teaches them, If they lead, but they live their lives according to your example. If you hit your children, they will hit their children, and they will hit other children. You know what I mean? Because that's all you're teaching them to do is hit. When they want to control something, they just hit, right? That's what that teaches, right? And same with verbal abuse. You're telling your kids, oh, you're just a bad kid. You're just up to no good all the time, and just running them down all the time. That's exactly what they will do to their family, their children, and they will do that to other people in their lives, because all you're doing is teaching them how to mimic you. So when you see somebody who's out there abusing, you can pretty much bet they were probably abused. Not every case, because not everybody who's been abused goes on to abuse their children. I know this is a fact, so that's kind of a myth. But a lot of times, you got to wonder what kind of homes these abusers grew up in, right? I mean, I'm just kind of going by example, because my mom was abused as a child, and she was abused horribly by my grandmother, and she went on to abuse her own children and me. And so, and she was upset about being abused, but yet she couldn't stop herself from abusing us, right? So this is the thing. It can happen, right? The whole cycle of abuse. So it's very important that people realize this is happening, and whether they want to know it or, understand it or think that it's possible, it is happening. It's happening all over the place. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys. That's how much it's happening. So if you're in a room with 6 guys, one of you will probably have been abused in some way under the age of 18. And if you're in a room with 3 girls, one of you will have been abused, if not more, sexually or in any other way, under the age of 18. So really, it all comes down to relationships within families, parents learning how to cope, learning how to problem solve as families. And when your kids are showing signs that they're getting into trouble and they're starting to, sort of break off from you and seek something somewhere else, whether it's drug use or criminal behavior, get the child some help, because they will know that you care about them then. They might not appreciate you getting them some help, but then they will know, hey, that's my parent, and they love me enough to make me stop what I'm doing. They love me enough to get help instead of just beating on me, cursing at me, throwing me around, throwing me out of the house, this kind of behavior, right, which we see. I used to see this all the time. That's not how you help your children. You got to lead, you got to show them, you know what I mean? Hey, I'm the parent. I'm the one that knows this is bad, you need help, and I love you enough that it's called tough love. You know what I mean? But it's not called, let's beat the crap out of the kids, call them names, throw them out of the house. That's not love. That's just giving up and showing just how bad of a parent you really are. So I think as parents, everybody just needs to really rethink the way that they handle themselves around their children, and get some help for themselves as well as their children, to learn how to cope and learn how to problem solve, learn how to deal with the stresses of this world that is very stressful, and have a solid family. You know what I mean? A family that grows together and learns to really love each other and count on each other to be there for each other, and able to know that your children would know that any kind of trouble they were in, they could come home and they could talk to you, and that you might not be happy with it, but that you're not going to hurt them or throw them out, or look at them for the rest of their lives with this look in your eyes like, oh, you're just disgusting to me or something. There has to be real love there, right? And there's just, it's sad, but honestly, this is what needs to happen. And, it's going to happen within all of our homes. And that's why this is so important that we talk about this stuff, right? Because this is our, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys. How many abusers does that mean? There are a lot. When 1 in 3 girls is abused and 1 in 6 boys, look how many abusers there must be out there. They're the people that we work with. They're the people that sit right next to you in the office. They're the guys out working at, on some sort of construction site. They're the guys in the office. They're the bus drivers. They're the school teachers. They're home abusing their kids, whether it's sexually, physically, psychologically, emotionally, verbally, you name it. They're home abusing their kids. Then they go and they look like completely upstanding citizens the next day. You know what I mean? It's a farce. It's a complete farce, and that's why it's so important that we change this whole thing and start working on it now. Because the sooner we work on it, the better off we're all going to be. We pitch out $104 billion annually because of child abuse and neglect, right? $104 billion. Why don't they just pitch out $104 billion and stop this mess? Then we won't have to deal with this anymore. That's my beef, you know? Like, this is ridiculous to keep this going. And I mean, we can't put video cameras inside everybody's home. It's unfortunate. I wish we could. But we can't. So, you know, what we have to do is provide programs that really work. And so what we're going to have to do is change what's out there now, because what's out there now isn't really working. It might have worked at one time, but it's not working now. And we need to come up with something that works. And we've got to have some young thinkers, new thinkers, young people with some new ideas. And, you know, study what doesn't work and then don't do it. And go on with something that is proving to work, follow that example, and move on with what's working. And just bag what's not working. Because it's quite obvious that there's not a whole lot working out there. Because, you know, there's too many children still being abused, there's too much, there's not enough funding, too many kids are slipping through the cracks, you know, not being removed when they should be, kids being removed when they shouldn't be, foster care homes that are worse than their original home, you know, you name it. It's absolutely disgusting. There's no help for survivors, you know, there's a little bit of, you know, if you have money, you might be able to get some help, you know what I mean? But if you don't have money, I can imagine it's a big red tape situation, right? And that's just unfortunate. That's really sad, because 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be abused, right? So this is the whole issue, people. And the stats are just getting worse. So pretty soon it's going to be 1 in 2 girls and 1 in 4 boys, which it probably already is. It's just that it's underreported, right? So it's pathetic, and we really need to make these changes like now. So that's the whole issue with this whole child rights thing, right? We have to uphold the laws, and we have to get something done. They go on to talk about, I'm just going to read down through here. They talk about emotional neglect here, other physical neglect and whatnot. We'll go with physical neglect here, the next portion of this article. It says refusal of health care, the failure to provide or allow needed care in accordance with recommendations of a competent health care professional for a physical injury, illness, medical condition, or impairment. And delay in health care, the failure to seek timely and appropriate medical care for a serious health problem that any reasonable layman would have recognized as needing professional medical attention. And abandonment, this is another sign of physical neglect, the desertion of a child without arranging for reasonable care and supervision. And expulsion, other blatant refusals of custody, such as permanent or indefinite expulsion of a child from the home without adequate arrangement for care by others, or refusal to accept custody of a returned runaway. And inadequate supervision, leaving a child unsupervised or inadequately supervised for extended periods of time, or allowing the child to remain away from home overnight without the parent or caretaker knowing or attempting to determine the child's whereabouts. And other physical neglect includes inadequate nutrition, clothing or hygiene, conspicuous inattention to avoidable hazards in the home, and other forms of reckless disregard of the child's safety and welfare, for example, driving with the child while intoxicated, leaving a young child in a car unattended, and I mean, we see lots of that, right? Emotional neglect, it says permitted chronic truancy, habitual absenteeism from school averaging at least 5 days a month if the parent or guardian is informed of the problem and does not attempt to intervene. And failure to enroll or other truancy, failure to register or enroll a child of mandatory school age, causing the child to miss at least 1 month of school, or a pattern of keeping a school-age child home without valid reasons. And inattention to special education need, refusal to allow or failure to obtain recommended remedial education services, or neglect in obtaining or following through with treatment for a child's diagnosed learning disorder or other special education need without reasonable cause. And they go on to talk about emotional neglect as well. There's a whole lot of stuff here. So we'll continue with this on Wednesday night. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We have about a minute left. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Please check out our website at www.dreamcatchersporabusedchildren.com. And you can get some great information on there. You know, there's a PDF download, and it's free. And you can download that free PDF download. It's called the Child Abuse Handbook. It's compiled information written, compiled by Donna Shear, Sandra Potter. And it's all about child abuse, all the signs and symptoms of all the different types of abuse, how to report abuse, and how to get help if you're a parent struggling. There's all kinds of references, resources, links on there, and on our website as well. Be sure and check out our website. It's updated like daily, even hourly. Whenever there's new information, it's put on there, so be sure and check that out. And it's a great place for survivors. I personally love that website. It makes me very happy to see it there, and very content that there's actually a group of people that do care. I'm so happy to be a part of this, and thank you so much for tuning in and being here for me. I know most of you listen are my friends, and I thank you so much. You're also very dear to me, and I just keep you in my heart, and I keep you in my prayers. And but yeah, I'll be on again tomorrow night with Donna Shear on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio at www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. And then again Wednesday night with Elizabeth Brawley. So be sure and tune in to our shows at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'll be on tomorrow morning, one child abuse survivor to another, 6 o'clock a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So we'll see you then. Take care, everybody, and have a great night. Bye-bye.